paradrama tales.
He ate the pudding cup. I asked him not to, and somehow that was the moment I knew I was done. Not because of the snack, but because every time I asked for something. No matter how small he taught me, it didn't matter. And this time, I finally listened. The first time he interrupted me, it was over something silly. We were at dinner with his friends, I remember, because it was the first time I'd met them. Someone brought up travel, and I started to tell a story about the time I'd gotten stranded in Prague during a layover. I barely got through the first sentence before he cut in. "Oh yeah, she always gets herself into the weirdest airport situations," he said, laughing like I was the punchline to a joke I didn't realize we were telling. I smiled, small, a little caught off guard, and I let it go. It wasn't that big a deal, right? I figured he was nervous. Maybe he was trying to make everyone comfortable. Maybe he just got excited. But then it happened again later that week. I was telling him something about work, something that had actually upset me. I'd been passed over in a meeting, and it left me feeling invisible. Mid-sentence, he glanced at his phone and said, "Oh, did I tell you what my boss said today? You'll laugh." And just like that, the floor dropped out from under what I was saying, what I was feeling. I paused. He didn't notice. And I wish I could say I called it out then. I wish I'd said, "Hey, I'm talking. This matters." But I didn't. I swallowed it, like I'd been taught was polite, like women are taught to do. I figured he just wasn't a great listener. I made excuses for him the way we do when we want so badly for something to work. But that moment stayed with me, not because it was dramatic, but because it wasn't. Because it was so easy for him to tune me out, so effortless for him to pivot the conversation away from what I felt as if what I felt was optional. That was the first interruption. The first moment I shrank just a little to keep things smooth. And when I think back now, I see that I didn't just lose my sentence. I lost a piece of myself every time it happened after that. Because interruptions aren't just words colliding. They're power saying, what I want to say matters more than what you're trying to share. And I wish I'd known then what I know now, that the first time someone talks over you, you can laugh it off, or you can pay attention. Because how someone handles your voice is a preview of how they'll handle your heart. Being dismissed doesn't come with sirens. It doesn't always arrive as yelling or slamming doors. Sometimes it shows up quietly wrapped in a sigh, tucked into a shrug, folded into a half smile that says, "You're overthinking it again." At first it's subtle. You mention something that bothered you, a rough moment at work, a weird vibe from a friend, and he tells you, "You always read too much into things." You ask if he remembered your doctor's appointment, the one you were nervous about, and he says, "Oh, that was today. I thought that was next week." You share something vulnerable, a childhood memory, something that still makes you ache, and he chuckles. "Well, you turned out fine." And none of it feels big enough to fight over. None of it sounds cruel enough to justify saying, "Hey, that hurt," so you let it go. You let it go again, and again. Until one day, you stop bringing things up altogether. Because what's the point of opening your chest if the person across from you is just going to lean back and ask if you're being dramatic? That's what being dismissed feels like. It's not an explosion, it's erosion. It's a slow, steady wearing away of your sense that your feelings matter, that your perception is valid, that your experience is worth being listened to even if someone else doesn't fully understand it. It's a kind of emotional gravity you start to sink into yourself. You rehearse conversations before having them. You downplay your own pain so it doesn't sound too much. You become fluent in the language of second guessing. And the saddest part, you start dismissing yourself too. You hear his voice in your head. "It's not that deep. Don't make this into a thing. Just let it go." So you do. You let it all go. Your voice, your needs, your right to be taken seriously. And what you're left with is a version of you that knows exactly how to keep the peace, but doesn't know how to be heard anymore. That's not overreacting. That's surviving something soft and invisible that chips away at your sense of self, until one day a pudding cup becomes the last straw, not because it mattered, but because for once you finally did. It was chocolate, just a single pudding cup I'd picked out at the store, tucked behind the almond milk in the fridge. One of those small comforts you buy when you're having a rough week, when work drains you, when your body feels off, when you just need something sweet at the end of the day. That's yours. And I told him, plainly, directly, "Hey, I've been looking forward to this. Please don't eat it." He laughed, said, "What am I, a snack thief?" I smiled. "I'm serious." He gave me that exaggerated salute. "Yes, ma'am," like he was humoring me. And then the next night, it was gone. Not just eaten, but completely unmentioned. No oops, no apology, No, sorry, I forgot. Just silence and an empty space in the fridge. I opened the door, I stared, and I felt at this sharp little heartbreak that didn't belong to a dessert at all. It was never about the pudding. It was about the fact that I had asked for something clearly, calmly, and it didn't matter. It was the same script I'd seen before, the same dismissal dressed up as chill, the same wave of disappointment followed by the even heavier wave of self-doubt. Am I really upset over this? But it wasn't this. It was every time before. It was being talked over. It was being forgotten. It was watching my boundaries get treated like a punchline. This was just the first time I didn't talk myself out of it. I stood in that kitchen longer than I should have, staring into the fridge like it might explain something to me. But it didn't. It just confirmed what I already knew, that in this relationship, even the smallest part of me could be ignored without a second thought. And so, I left. Not in a rage, not with shouting or slamming doors. I just said, it's not about the pudding. It's about how I feel when you ignore me. It's about how I keep making myself small so you don't have to feel uncomfortable. And he still didn't get it, still tried to make it about snacks and labels and being dramatic. But I was done explaining, because when the smallest ask can't be respected, it's never just about the snack. It's about the message underneath it. You don't matter enough. And that finally was something I couldn't swallow anymore. I didn't yell. There was no dramatic exit, no suitcase thrown into the hallway, no neighbors peeking through blinds, wondering what all the noise was about. Because by the time I decided to leave, the loud part had already happened inside me. The real storm had passed days before, in the silence of the fridge door, in the echo of 1,000 conversations where I was the only one listening. So, when I sat across from him and said, I think I'm done, I wasn't trying to prove a point. I wasn't trying to win. I was trying to end a quiet war I'd been fighting alone. He looked at me like I'd just grown another head, like he couldn't understand how something so small could lead to something so final. Over a snack, he said. I shook my head. No. Over being ignored. Over being told again and again that I'm too much, too sensitive, too serious when all I ever did was ask to be considered. He laughed. That awkward kind of laugh that people do when they feel cornered. You could have just talked to me. But I had. So many times. In so many ways. The problem wasn't that I hadn't spoken, it's that he never really listened. Not when it was about me. He said, You're blowing this out of proportion. I said, You always say that when I finally stop shrinking. And that was it. No screaming, no scene. Just two people in a quiet room, one realizing too late that being chill isn't the same as being happy, and the other finally choosing peace that didn't come with self-erasure. I packed a bag. Not because I was trying to hurt him, but because I couldn't keep hurting myself just to stay close. I didn't need him to understand. Not fully. Not right then. I just needed to reclaim the parts of me that had gotten so used to being overlooked, they'd stop speaking up altogether. Walking away calmly doesn't mean I didn't care. It means I finally did. After I said it that I was done, he paused like he was waiting for a punchline I hadn't delivered yet. And when it didn't come, when I just sat there calm and steady, he tilted his head and said, Well, maybe if you labeled it better, I wouldn't have eaten it. That was his first response. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I didn't realize it meant that much to you. Not even a tired, can we talk about this? Just a technicality, a deflection. As if the issue wasn't emotional erosion, but poor kitchen organization. He wanted it to be about tape and Sharpies, about pudding placement, about miscommunication. Because that's easier than facing the truth that I had been communicating the whole time, and he just never made space to receive it. And then came the second blow, wrapped in casual dismissal. Most girlfriends would have just let it go, but you like to be dramatic. That one sat differently. Because it wasn't just a refusal to take responsibility, it was an invitation to feel ashamed for ever speaking up. As if my standards were the problem, as if my disappointment was a character flaw. He needed the narrative to twist so he could stay the reasonable one, and I could be the emotional woman blowing things out of proportion. But I didn't take the bait, not this time. I didn't argue, didn't defend myself, didn't list all the other moments he'd brushed me off or talked over me or made me question my own feelings. Because I suddenly realized, if that was his honest, instinctive response to me saying, I feel dismissed, then he had just proved my point. He didn't need to yell. He didn't need to insult me outright. He just had to be exactly who he was, and I could see everything clearly. Sometimes the most important part of a conversation is what gets said when someone thinks they're still in control. And that night, with a shrug and a joke and a smirk, he told me everything I needed to know. So I picked up my keys and I left, with no fire, no tears. Just the quiet, steady conviction that I had finally heard him clearly, completely for the very first time. I used to pride myself on being the chill girlfriend. You know the type. Low maintenance. Cool with everything. The one who doesn't get too emotional, who laughs things off, who doesn't make a scene in public or press too hard in private. I wore it like a badge. I thought being easygoing made me better, less dramatic, less needy, more desirable. I didn't realize at the time that chill was just another word for quiet, another word for invisible. Because here's what being chill started to look like in real life. It looked like letting him change the subject every time I tried to talk about something important. It looked like me saying, "That actually hurt my feelings," and him replying, "You're making a big deal out of nothing." It looked like me learning to laugh at jokes that stung, learning to breathe through disappointments that piled up, learning to give more grace than I ever got back. And over time, it chipped away at me. Not all at once, just slowly enough that I didn't notice how heavy silence had become until I tried to speak again. I didn't want to be high maintenance, didn't want to be the girlfriend who nitpicked or nagged or started fights over small things. So I let the small things slide, until they weren't small anymore. Until I couldn't remember the last time I brought up a problem without rehearsing it in my head a dozen times first. Until I couldn't tell the difference between being flexible and being flattened. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've apologized for your tone when your message was already polite. Maybe you've second-guessed your reaction because someone told you always do this. Maybe you've bitten your tongue so often you forgot what your voice even sounded like when it wasn't filtered through someone else's comfort. Well, I'm not chill anymore. I'm clear. I'm done folding myself in half to fit into someone else's version of low maintenance. I'm done confusing silence for strength and tolerance for love. Because love doesn't ask you to be less. Love doesn't feel threatened by your needs. And real partnership doesn't require you to earn basic respect by staying small. So, no, I'm not chill. I'm awake. And I'm not sorry for that. After the breakup, the texts started coming in. Not from him, but from the in-betweens, the mutual friends, the neutral parties, the people who love to say things like, "I just want to understand both sides." And on the surface, it seemed harmless, just people asking what happened, just people trying to get the full story. But it didn't take long before the tone changed. "You left him?" Over-putting. I mean, I get being annoyed, but was it really worth ending the whole relationship? He always said, "You were a little intense." And there it was. The quiet verdict dressed up as curiosity. The way they didn't say I was wrong, but made sure I felt like maybe I was. They didn't see the late nights where I lay awake trying to decide if I was being too sensitive. They didn't hear the tone he used when he said, "You always have to make things into a big deal." They weren't there for the 1,000 little ways I was trained to shrink myself to keep the peace. But somehow they were sure I'd overreacted. That's the thing about mutual friends. They often want things to stay comfortable. They want both sides to be valid. They want everything to be fixable with a little patience and a softer tone. What they don't want is to sit in the discomfort of your truth if it disrupts their image of him or the group dynamic. Because if they admit your pain was real, they have to admit they didn't notice. And if they notice now, they might have to choose sides, and no one likes doing that when the pain isn't loud enough to demand it. So they say things like, "He's not perfect, but he loved you." Or, "You were such a good couple," and worst of all, it just seems like something you could have worked through. But here's what they don't understand. I did work through it. I worked through every silent moment, every casual dismissal, every time I swallowed my needs until they left a pit in my chest. And by the time I walked away, it wasn't sudden. It was earned. So, to the mutuals who don't get it, you don't have to. This wasn't your relationship to survive. I didn't leave because of a snack. I left because I refused to keep explaining why I deserve to be heard. And I'm not going back just to make everyone else comfortable with the version of me who stayed quiet. The word he used was dramatic. It rolled off his tongue like a throwaway joke. Like it was obvious. Like I should laugh along with him and feel silly forever thinking my feelings mattered that much. And I've heard that word before. Not just from him, but from other men, from teachers, from friends, from strangers on the internet. Dramatic. It's the word they use when they don't want to deal with what you're really saying. When your pain makes them uncomfortable, when your truth makes them look in the mirror too long. It's the label that turns clear communication into character flaw. Because when a man is direct, he's assertive. When a woman is direct, she's emotional. When a man sets a boundary, he's decisive. When a woman does it, she's overreacting. But here's what I've learned. It's not dramatic to want to be heard. It's not dramatic to ask, please don't ignore me. It's not dramatic to say, that hurt my feelings. It's not dramatic to expect respect even over small things. And no, I don't think I'm fragile. I think I've been strong for far too long in places where I shouldn't have had to be. I was strong when I stayed quiet to avoid another fight. I was strong when I let things slide that chipped away at me. I was strong when I made excuses soften the truth and tried to be the version of myself that wouldn't make anyone else uncomfortable. But strength isn't silence. Real strength is saying, this matters to me, even when you know they might roll their eyes. Even when you know they'll say, not this again. Because there comes a point where minimizing your needs just to keep the peace starts to feel a lot like living with the volume turned down on your own life. And I don't want to live that way anymore. If that makes me dramatic, so be it. Because I'd rather be labeled too much than live the rest of my life being told I'm not enough just because I dared to speak up. I used to think leaving someone had to look like chaos, tears shouting a dramatic goodbye. But mine didn't. Mine looked like a quiet night, a missing pudding cup, and a final line drawn where I had erased myself too many times. And in the weeks that followed, I didn't feel proud. Not at first. I felt unsure, guilty, and tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from one big thing, but from carrying the weight of 1,000 tiny ones that no one else seemed to notice. But then something shifted. One morning, I poured my coffee and realized I hadn't second-guessed myself in days. No voice in my head asking, was that too much? No tightness in my chest, waiting for my feelings to be questioned or corrected. Just me, breathing a little easier, standing a little taller, reclaiming space I didn't even realize I had surrendered. And that's when I knew it's not dramatic to walk away from someone who teaches you your voice doesn't matter. It's brave, it's clear, it's necessary. So, if you're out there still wondering if your pain is valid, if the thing that hurt you is big enough, if you're making too much of what they keep calling nothing, let me say this to you gently and directly. Your boundaries are not too much. Your clarity is not an overreaction. Your need to be heard is not a flaw. You are not wrong for wanting more than being tolerated. And if someone tells you you're hard to love because you ask for respect, they were never offering love, just convenience. If this story resonated with you, leave a comment below. I want to hear your voice, the one they said was too loud, too soft, too complicated. And if you're ready to stop apologizing for expecting emotional maturity, hit that subscribe button, because around here we don't shrink to fit love. We grow and we ask it to meet us there.